están? Un placer estar aquí con ustedes. Qué maravilla. So, my name is Jason Silva, and I'm a media artist and filmmaker, and I'm interested in exponential thinking. But let me start by talking a little bit about Ernest Becker. Ernest Becker wrote the 1974 Pulitzer Prize-winning book, The Denial of Death. And that book changed my life. That book basically distilled the human condition, and it said that the human condition is defined by our death anxiety. We are the only species that is aware of its mortality. To have emerged from nothing, to have a name, consciousness of self, deep inner feeling, an excruciating inner yearning for life and self-expression, and yet with all this, yet to die. We have the mental capacity to ponder the infinite, yet we're housed in these heart-pumping, breath-gasping, decaying bodies. We are godly, yet creaturely. And that book really affected me because basically it says, in spite of all of our efforts, we're these mortal beings, and what do we do? So Ernest Becker says the only way we can cure the affliction of this death anxiety is through three solutions to the problem of death. The first solution to the problem of death he calls the religious solution. We're all familiar with this one. It provides a narrative that promises us an afterlife, which makes the mortal coil more bearable. But in secular societies, the religious solution to the problem of death no longer really satiates that itch. The second solution to the problem of death is the romantic solution. The romantic solution is when we deify our lovers. She's like the wind, she's my salvation, she is the sun. We turn our lovers into gods and goddesses who can save us from our mortal coil. But ultimately, no relationship can bear the burden of godhood. Eventually, our gods reveal their clay feet. So the third solution to the problem of death, ultimately, I think is the most interesting one, and that's the creative solution to the problem of death. And that's the one where we are defined by the great works of art, by our contribution to humanity that will somehow outlive us when we die, the symbolic immortality that is granted to us by the creative solution to the death problem. But I actually take this a step further now, because I think that through technology, we are literalizing the promise of the creative solution to the problem of death, because technology is what actually extends our sphere of possibility. We didn't stay in the caves, we haven't stayed in the planet, and soon we won't stay with the limitations of our biology. The cognitive philosopher Andy Clark defines technology as an exoskeleton, extending our thought, our reach, and our vision. Terence McKenna said technology is the real skin of our species. As Ray Kurzweil says, the very first time that an early hominid picked up a stick to reach a fruit on a really high tree, we've been using our tools to extend who and what we are. Andy Clark says we need to get over our skin back bias, and instead of seeing ourselves as separate from our tools, he says our tools are who and what we are. Our skyscrapers, our jet engines, they are outgrowths of the human imagination. They are us. Right now, we are exploring the Martian landscape. Our frontal lobes, the summary of 1,000 minds working together is in that planet exploring it right now. And this is unbelievable. This is amazing. And the most amazing part of technology is that it's evolving at an exponential rate. We've talked a lot about this at this conference, the singularity, this event horizon, just beyond our reach, where it's going to transform the human experience. And exponential thinking is key, because we tend to see the world in a linear and local way, but as Peter Diamandis says, the world is global and exponential. The best explanation to really elucidate exponential growth is the 30 steps example that Ray Kurzweil talks about. If you take 30 linear steps, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, you get to 30. That's the way we project things, right? But if you take those same 30 steps exponentially, you go 2, 4, 8, 16. Those same 30 steps later, at an exponential rate, you get to 1 billion. That's the reason that the cell phone in your pocket today is 1,000,000 times cheaper, 1,000,000 times smaller, and 1,000 times more powerful than a $60 million supercomputer that was half a building in size in Stanford 40 years ago. So what used to be half a building now fits in your pocket. In the next 25 years, it'll fit inside your blood cells. The supercomputers of yesteryear are in everybody's hands. That's why Singularity University says leverage these emerging technologies to see if you can impact the lives of 1 billion people in a positive way. So a number of months ago, I decided that these ideas are so big that they don't fit inside of their usual academic packaging. And I set out on a mission to create a series of short films. I call them shots of philosophical espresso, to reinvigorate audiences and pull people so radically out of context and force them to gawk in amazement at the ubiquitous everyday wonders we're culturally disposed to ignore. As Coleridge says, the challenge is to awaken the mind's attention from the lethargy of custom and the film of familiarity and redirecting it instead to the wonders of existence. And so these are non-commercial films. They're 2 or 3 minute small mashups that really try to invigorate you and get inside your skin to make you see things from a radically different perspective. So the first film that I want to show you today is on the theme of radical openness, and it's really an anthem on the power of ideas to transform the world. Here at La Ciudad de las Ideas, we know this, that ideas transform the planet. And so the first video I want to show you premiered at the TED conference this year. Please have a look at radical openness. Let's show the first video. You know, I love this idea of radical openness, the free exchange of information, the free flow of ideas, creating spaces in which ideas can have sex, as Matt Ridley talks about. And this is huge because it turns out that ideas are just as real as the neurons they inhabit, as James Gleick tells us. You know, a new kingdom rises above the biosphere. Denizens of this kingdom are ideas, because ideas have retained some of the properties of organisms, it turns out. They leap from brain to brain. They compete for the limited resources of our attention. They have infectivity. They have spreading power. They are what Richard Dawkins calls the new replicators, born from the primordial soup of human culture. Their vector of transmission is language and electronic communication. And though ideas are not made of nucleic acid, they have achieved more evolutionary change, and at a rate that leaves the old gene panting far behind. You know, Ray Kurzweil says our ability to create virtual models in our heads, combined with our modest-looking thumbs, was sufficient to usher in a secondary force of evolution called technology. And it will continue until the entire universe is at our fingertips. This is unbelievable stuff. It speaks to the telescoping nature of evolutionary change. More change in the last 100 years than in the last billion years. Terence McKenna actually wrote that from the moment that human beings invented language, biological evolution essentially ceased, and evolution became a cultural epigenetic phenomenon. Now, we take in matter of low organization, we put it through our mental filters, and we extrude it in the form of space shuttles and iPhones. You know, the imaginary foundation tells us that what imagination does is it allows us to conceive of delightful future possibilities, pick the most amazing one, and pull the present forward to meet it. You know, imagine how impoverished this world would have been if we hadn't invented the technology of the oil painting in time for Van Gogh, or the technology of the musical instrument in time for Beethoven and Mozart to unfurl through it. You know, with the revolutions in biotechnology, nanotechnology, the free exchange of information is allowing us to conceive of radical new things. Freeman Dyson says, in the future, new generation of artists will be writing genomes with the fluency that Blake and Byron wrote verses. What is great in man, said Nietzsche, is that he is a bridge and not an end. You know, we're on a trajectory smack in the middle between the born and the made, wrote Kevin Kelly. And so radical openness, it's huge. It's a universe of possibility. It's gray infused by color. It's the invisible revealed. It's the mundane blown away by awe. We need to cultivate radical openness as a way of participating and accelerating evolution. Wow. Wow, indeed. Thank you so much. Thank you. And, you know, you can probably tell that that's why I call them shots of philosophical espresso, because they're really like invigorating. And really, it's my attempt to capture and manage attention, because only when our attention is fully occupied, only when we are immersed in something, can any kind of transpersonal growth, persuasion, or education take place. So the capture and management of attention is key. Now, the other thing that these films are trying to do is hold inspiration in stasis. The ecstatic euphoria that we get when we have a profound realization or insight is usually fleeting. Insight and inspiration tend to be defined by their impermanence. And I'm not comfortable with that. I'm not comfortable with the idea that the greatest moments of our lives have to be so fleeting. And so these films are really my attempt to communicate the lonely experience of inspiration, which usually happens in our head. And the goal of every artist is to communicate that vision in song, in poetry, in paint, or in these shots of philosophical espresso. And we need to really think of this. We need to think of technology as an extension of our nervous system. The first information technology was the alphabet. The alphabet allowed us to extend information through time and space outside of DNA. We went from genes to memes with the invention of culture. And now memes, ideas, transform the world. And this, for me, this induces a state of awe, a state of wonder. I'm caught caught up in the marvel of it all. And it turns out that human beings have this unique capacity to contemplate themselves, to marvel at existence and progress in science and technology. And it turns out that being in awe is actually biologically advantageous. It has profound psychological benefits to blow our own minds. Timothy Leary was right. In order to use your heads, you've got to go out of your mind. And now I want to end with one more video on the power of awe, on the power of wonder, on the power of all those sensations that we have had right here at la maravillosa Ciudad de las Ideas. So I leave you now with the biological advantage of being awestruck. Segundo video. Eminent psychologist Nicholas Humphrey has written of the biological advantage of being awestruck. How fortuitous, he says, for a species to find that its own ability to contemplate, to marvel at its own existence, has been evolutionarily advantageous. In other words, it has been biologically selected for because it informs our life with a sense of cosmic significance that makes us work harder to persist and to survive. In other words, awe has helped us survive. And you know, a recent study out of Stanford on the subject of awe kind of validates this idea. They have found that regular incidences of awe leave residual benefits upon the individual that persist, such as increased feelings of empathy and compassion towards others, increased feelings of altruism, and increased feelings of general well-being. In this study, they defined awe as an experience of such perceptual expansion, such perceptual vastness, that you literally have to reconfigure, upgrade your mental schemata just to accommodate, just to take in the scale of the experience. This is amazing. We've all felt this before. The first time we stared upon the Grand Canyon or succumbed to the immersive power of an IMAX film. But perhaps the most exquisite account of the experience of awe was articulated by the brilliant Ross Anderson when writing about the Hubble Space Telescope. Pay attention. He says that the Hubble has given us nothing less than an ontological awakening, a forceful reckoning with what is, allowing us to contemplate space and time on a scale just shy of the infinite. Wild. He says gazing upon the famous deep field photograph literally allows us to mainline the whole of time through the optic nerve. To fit something so impossibly large to something so impossibly small. It's incredible. He says through the sheer aesthetic force of its discoveries, the Hubble distills the impossibly complex abstractions of astrophysics into these singular expressions of color and light, vindicating Keats' famous couplet, "Beauty is truth, truth, beauty." Thank you.
Ábreme,
Thank
ábreme.
you. Gracias, gracias, muchas gracias. Qué bueno.
Bravo.
Andrés, gracias.